Hello, folks. Welcome. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show, broadcasting from Franklin, Indiana on 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial all across central Indiana. We're here on this show to raise the curtain and shine the flashlight on what is going on in D.C. and right here in Indiana. Today's show is about the greatest hoax in human history, the myth of global warming. I say myth, but it is really the religion of global warming. And sadly, our own Indiana GOP right here in Indiana worships at the altar of climate change just as badly as any liberal Democrat. This is about how our local Congresswoman, Erin Houchin, refuses to repeal the Green New Deal scam. Folks, I am old enough to remember when it wasn't global warming, it was a coming ice age. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Mike Wilson, who I grew up with at Roseacres. Mike, welcome to the studio.
So it's great to be back, John.
Justin George.
Great to be here.
And Aidan Marietta.
Always great to be here.
So if you recall, Mike, did you ever watch Star Trek?
Yes, I did. I remember very well.
Okay, the actor Leonard Nimoy, he played Spock. He was the actor from Star Trek in the TV show in the 1960s and early 70s. I think it went off of the air about, 75, something like that?
Probably.
Okay, just like today, back then they used celebrities to scare you about whatever the climate was going to do. And back then, it wasn't global warming, it was the ice age was coming. We have an audio clip from Leonard Nimoy to play for you.
Advance, the result could be hunger and death on a scale unprecedented in all of history. What scientists are telling us now is that the threat of an ice age is not as remote as they once thought. During the lifetime of our grandchildren, Arctic cold and perpetual snow could turn most of the inhabitable portions of our planet into a polar desert.
In 1977, the worst winter in a century struck the United States. Arctic cold gripped the Midwest for weeks on end. Great blizzards paralyzed cities of the Northeast. One desperate night in Buffalo, 8 people froze to death in marooned cars. Pat Bushnell was on the road that night.
Traffic just absolutely stopped. I was afraid of being stuck in the car all night long with the cold and the wind running out of gas. And then what? I think that if we had to go through a real bad winter, just like we just went through, I think we'd have to think about moving someplace else.
Move where? The brutal Buffalo winter might become common all over the United States. Climate experts believe the next ice age is on its way. According to recent evidence, it could come sooner than anyone had expected. At weather stations in the far north, temperatures have been dropping for 30 years. Seacoasts, long free of summer ice, are now blocked year-round. According to some climatologists, within a lifetime, we might be living in the next ice age.
Okay, folks, well...
Love the music, by the way. Me too.
Well, folks, guess what? The weather is the weather. It will change so that it may snow tomorrow. It may be a sunny day tomorrow. Hopefully it'll be a nice, beautiful day. But what we learn from that is folks are always using what the weather of today is for a purpose, for an agenda. And what we got from that, if you remember, back then, these left-wing groups were talking about, it's going to be global freezing. We're all going to freeze to death. And today it changed. It is, in 2013, the Sierra Club was asking why the Arctic sea ice will vanish that year. Well, guess what, folks? It didn't vanish. It's doing just fine. It's always about scaring people. In the 1960s, it was oil will be gone in 10 years. In the 1970s, we're in for another ice age in the next 10 years. In the 1980s, it was acid rain will destroy all crops in 10 years. We're all going to starve to death. In the 1990s, the ozone layer will be gone in 10 years. And in 2000, the ice caps will be gone in 10 years. None of that happened, but all resulted in higher taxes. That's the key word there, and that's why politicians love to talk about climate change. They get to enact more taxes and spend more of your money. But guess what? There is no climate emergency. Over 1,100 eminent scientists declare there is no climate emergency. And that's by an article by Clintel Group. Climate science should be less political, while climate policy should be more scientific. In particular, scientists should emphasize that their modeling output is not the result of magic. Computer models are human-made. Folks, a large percentage of South Dakota's record daily maximum temperatures were set between 1925 and 1945. If climate scientists were actual scientists, they would want to understand this rather than cover it up. Same thing in Kansas. 60% of Kansas daily maximum temperature records were set before 1960, with the peak years being 1936, 1934, 1939, and 1911. And this is fresh news here. Steve Malloy from Junk Science on X. Earth Day Climate Report. So far, April 2025 has been more than 2 degrees cooler than April of 1981. That's 44 years of emissions and urban heat island down the drain. What's he talking about? We've all been talking about global warming, where they pulled these temperatures, which we know now have been manipulated to show that temperature is higher when in fact it's actually cooler. And how does this relate to today? That is the major tenet of the Democratic Party. This is from Bernie Sanders. Fossil fuels are a threat to the planet. We only have 8 to 9 years to act before cities are underwater. He said that 8 years ago. But the cities aren't underwater. And you know what he's doing today? Where he refused to fly a private airline because he had places to go. He flies around private jets. What's his carbon
Just
footprint?
like Al Gore.
Right. Yeah, Bernie says, what do you think I'm doing? I'm going to fly private, like fly in a commercial plane like a peasant?
And leave 30,000 people waiting or whatever he said.
Right. No. But back to on this climate. Tony Heller, this is on Twitter. Unprecedented glacial melt has caused sea level at Hoshijima, Japan, to be exactly the same as it was 90 years ago. There has been zero change in 90 years, nothing. And we are being taxed with carbon taxes now being on the table and carbon sequestration being forced with all these windmills and solar farms because coal is quote unquote bad. No, coal is not bad. Instead of spending money to rebuild wildfire ravaged Los Angeles County and prevent future wildfires, California will be spending another $500,000 to buy another 1,000 pointless electric school buses, paying up to 3 to 4 times more per electric bus than what a diesel bus would cost. It is all about just making things more expensive for taxpayers so that these politicians can keep spending and spending and spending. Look at what's happening with the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal, it was never about the environment. It was about funneling your tax dollars to line pockets of the deep staters running the climate change hoax NGOs. That's what's going on. It's not about actual climate change. It's just a scam to rake money in for these NGOs that will be able to preach about it and say how horrible things are going to be. But if you recall, their hoaxes are never true.
John, just out of curiosity, and I know you're an expert on this, what's the latest polar bear count?
There are 30,000 polar bear counts.
No kidding.
30,000. When Al Gore was born, there were 7,000 polar bears. Today, there's over 30,000. If you recall, back in the 1990s, Al Gore said polar bears would be disappearing. Well, great news, folks. There are lots more polar bears than ever before. The polar bears are doing just great. So, folks, when we come back, we'll get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Russ on The John Russ Show. We're talking about the scam of global warming climate change. This is from Steve Malloy from Twitter. The war on coal was and is a crime against America. The demolition of coal plants puts us in an especially deep hole. We need those plants now, and thanks to Obama and Biden, we will have to rebuild them and related infrastructure at great expense. And folks, it is going on right here today in southeastern Indiana. There are 2 coal-powered plants being shut down that are still well within the range of their service life. They were being closed early and being replaced by natural gas plants in the name of climate change for no reason. There is simply no reason. Coal is not bad. Carbon is not bad. It is all about the grift of just changing the type of electricity because there's money to be made by the utilities and the politicians who pocket money from the utilities' political donations. And if you look at any GOP congressman or senator in Indiana, you will see who is lining their pocket. They like raising your electric rates because they like making things change just for the sake of change, because it's more fun to go out and spend money than to just keep running an existing plant that is perfectly fine, producing safe, reliable electricity at a low cost. Kentucky has a much lower price of energy than what we do here in Indiana because they still primarily use coal energy. Indiana is much higher now because we are so reliant now on this intermittent wind energy and solar energy. We're talking about today in Indiana, some people are saying, oh, this is wonderful. We're going to have small nuclear plants everywhere. Guess who's behind that? Bill Gates enters the race to build mini nuclear reactors in Britain. Competition from billionaire's company TerraPower threatens blow for Rolls-Royce, the British company threatening to make that. Folks, do you see that? Bill Gates has been around thumping his chest about climate change. And here he is wanting to make money off of power plants to replace these perfectly good coal plants. China today is still building 2 new coal-powered plants every week, and they have been doing so for over 25 years. 2 new coal-powered plants just this week. They are expanding rapidly because they need all the power. So their carbon, if you believe that's bad, is exponentially more than what all the rest of the world has been attempting to cut for no reason. China more than makes up for it. They are bellowing out the carbon. They don't have the clean coal-powered plants we have in Indiana. If you've ever went and seen one of our coal-powered plants running, you don't see black soot bellowing out of the stacks. It's not. It's clean. The only thing you see is steam. Seriously. But if you go to China, they are bellowing black smoke out. It is just what you would imagine back in the 1880s, what would have happened here in Indiana. I am all for clean energy.
Same here.
And coal is...
Especially clean coal.
But no, we have to replace that inexpensive energy with very expensive wind and solar energy. But the hoax behind all this, it's always a scare tactic. You know, this is a recent article from the Phoenix Republic newspaper. Will beer be a climate casualty? Everything's always a scare. We're not going to have beer now. A study suggests that a warming climate will hurt barley crops, in turn raising the price of beer. I think it's the exact opposite. I think there's going to be plenty of barley. Farmers will always figure out how to grow crops and make all the barley they want. We would love to grow that here in Indiana. If they can't grow it somewhere else, they'll be just fine. This is from Andre Beliveau on X. If you want to know what happens when you overbuild intermittent, and that means solar and wind energy sources, onto the grid, look no further than what just happened in Spain and in Europe. From what we have learned from Germany a few years ago to what we are seeing in Spain over the last 2 weeks, it is a clear warning. Folks, Spain had zero energy for almost a week because the grid could not handle all these various types of intermittent energy. You know, solar power, if it was cloudy one day in one area and there was no wind in another area, they had no power. So net zero in Spain means net zero power. So when you hear politicians talk about net zero, that means they want you sitting at home, I guess, with a candle being your only light in your house.
And meanwhile, the solar panels won't be working all that well, and the bird killers will either explode or kill more birds.
And what happens when hail hits all the solar panels? That's another thing, too.
Right.
It's another thing they don't even pay attention to.
You know, net zero is how much electricity there will be. And that's their goal. It's just it's anti-American, it's anti-capitalism, it is pure socialism, and the Republicans in Indiana are buying it hook, line, and sinker. This is from Eva Vlaardenberg on Twitter. Electricity is down all across Spain, Portugal, and parts of France. Welcome to Europe 2025, where the fragility of modern life becomes ever more evident. Let's hope this gets fixed before sheer chaos erupts, and let's hope there will be more people think twice about the net zero future. It's back down to carbon. Everyone thinks carbon's bad. It is absolutely not bad. You as a human being breathe out 2 pounds of carbon every day. 2 pounds through CO2. What is going on?
And the trees love it.
And the trees love it, and it's okay, folks. It's not a bad thing. But Bill Gates, who wants to build these mini nuclear power plants everywhere, he's out pushing that cows have to take this product called Bovar to not be as flatulent as they normally would be, I'll put it politely, to cut down on quote-unquote carbon emissions coming out of
I'm going to assume AOC wrote that for him.
Yeah.
She probably did.
Well, back to Spain. You know, these last 2 weeks they've had zero power. Spain had 15 coal plants in 2018. 2018 they had 15 coal-powered plants. By 2025, only 2 remain operational, and the last is scheduled to close this year. That is not, well, they're doing it themselves. You know, they're all buying it hook, line, and sinker. This means that approximately 13 to 14 coal plants have been shut down or in the process of decommissioning. Why? Greta Thunberg asks, now the country is entirely in the dark. No electricity, no internet, no ability to charge not just your cell phones, but the electric cars. They're pushing on everyone. So for 2 weeks, you've had no car to drive around in.
So there's virtually no backup, no.
The backup is what they have no backup because they're closing all the coal power plants. The dirty secret here in Indiana and across the United States is coal powered plants are kept running in reserve to cover the shortages from wind and solar when on a cloudy day or on non-windy days. So there's still a coal plant somewhere making up the energy on the days that that there is no wind or the sun's not out.
Okay, I'm just glad the lights are on, John.
Well,
To be honest.
they're on today in Indiana, folks. But if the Indiana GOP gets their way, we're going to be just like Spain. They keep pushing wind on us and solar panels.
And may I just add that the IEDC still has the whole climate change stuff on their website.
It's all still there. I mean, I guess at some point we won't even be allowed to ride our bicycles, I guess.
So, Governor Braun, I call on you to at least get the IEDC to get that cleared off their website. At least that's just hogwash. Why on earth are we pushing that Green New Deal crap on Indiana?
And that was something that Chambers, who was the head of the IEDC, was pushing very hard for. He was pushing for the global warming stuff.
Well, and it's all based on this premise that things are getting worse. And they're not getting worse. You know, Antarctica is growing. This is from Peter Sweden on X. The Antarctic is actually growing. It has grown bigger by 108 gigatons of ice every year. It's not decreasing. And unfortunately, kids in school today are being taught that the polar caps are melting away, polar bears are disappearing, and that the temperature is going up. And it's actually the exact opposite. The temperature is actually lower than it was in 1981. If you look at the actual data that hasn't been messed with, they use false data to say the temperature is actually going up. But if you actually look at the real temperatures that have not been adjusted or manipulated, The temperature today is actually cooler than it was in 1981. So climate change, the weather may be different tomorrow, but that doesn't mean it's going to be worse. Folks, when we come back, we'll get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Here in the studio today with Mike Wilson, Aid Marietta, and Justin George. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
From Stephen Malloy again. 42 years ago today, the EPA predicted 10 feet of sea level rise at Philadelphia by 2083. As of 2025, the NOAA tide gauge at Philadelphia shows 0 change. In 42 years, there has been no change. But back in the 1990s, when they were talking about all this stuff, they were saying, oh, no, we're going to have the cities will be underwater. It is baloney. It's just a load of crap. Sorry. So, folks, what's really happening, and this is from Wide Awake Media, this is leaked audio of new Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney admitting that the net zero agenda is about, quote unquote, making a lot of money, not saving the planet. The quote is, we're going to make a lot of money off of this. And that's a liberal politician in Canada, but it's exactly the same here in Indiana and all across the country. Climate change is a scam just for making money. This is from Tony Heller. The surface of the Greenland ice sheet has gained 554 billion tons of new snow and ice since September 1st, which is above the 1981 to 2010 average and the highest for the date in at least 8 years. Remember, folks, they're saying the caps are decreasing and they're actually increasing substantially. 63 years ago today, this is from Steve Malloy, climatologists suggest setting off nuclear explosions in the Arctic to cause global warming. This is 63 years ago. This is from the Alabama Journal, May 5th, 1962, Quest for Climate Control. Benefits could be great, the headline reads, but there are dangers. This is from the Dateline Washington. Climatologists are working toward the day when they can do something about the weather. Already, it is possible to change the trend of weather in limited areas or microclimate, the National Geographic Society says. The National Geographic Society puts out, the National Geographic magazine, which has very much pushed the global climate change myth on everyone. But in 1962, this is what they're talking about. Changing climate on a large scale would call for grand measures. An engineer recently proposed building a dam across the Bering Strait and pumping the Arctic Ocean into the Pacific. The idea was to stimulate a warming flow from the Atlantic into the Arctic basin. That proposal was quickly dismissed when climatologists warned that the results would probably be exact opposite of what they were talking about. If you recall, we were talking about just a few weeks ago where in Britain and here in the United States, they're shooting balloons up in the air with sulfur dioxide in them to block the sun, and we get this acid raining back down on us, all in the name of climate change. Further into this Alabama Journal article from May 5th, 1962, a climatologist recently suggested touching off nuclear explosions in the Arctic. Theoretically, the massive ice clouds would prevent ground radiation from escaping into space and reflect it downward, raising the temperature. Like a giant greenhouse, the clouds would allow incoming solar radiation to pass through. So folks, 62 years ago, they're talking about nuking the polar caps to bring on climate change or global warming because we were freezing back then. And now we're the exact opposite. But they're not. Just let the climate take care of itself.
I don't even know what to say on that.
Well, in 2016, John Kerry visited Antarctica, calling it ground zero for climate change. Today, Antarctica is gaining 108 gigatons of ice per year. Moral of the story, never believe a climate alarmist. That's from Daniel Turner on Twitter.
I would just add that John Kerry also flies in a private jet called the Flying Squirrel and says he deserves it because he's an important figure. Sure, pal.
It's always rules for thee, but not for me. Tony Heller again. Sea ice extent at both poles is higher now than it was in 2006, when Al Gore made his science fiction movie, which won him the Nobel Prize. You'll remember the name of that movie?
An Inconvenient Truth. Yep. Sadly. The greatest piece of science fiction there ever was.
Well, it's an inconvenient untruth. This is a true fact here, folks. The global average temperature in 1880 was exactly 60 degrees. Guess what the global average temperature is in 2024?
Okay, what is it?
Exactly the same, 60 degrees.
Wow.
Okay.
There has been
No change.
zero change. But boy, you'd sure think that we'd have to be 20 degrees higher if you listen to the press and what we're taught in school, that we're just going to melt away. What was Greta Thunberg's quote?
How dare you?
And they blame everything on climate change. This is from News Hub. Children born with lower IQ due to climate change. Report suggests. That's an article from Katie Fitzgerald.
Oh, dear.
Everything gets blamed, and it's not changing. Sea level is exactly the same. The temperature is exactly the same.
Abundance of polar bears.
It's all about the money, and it's all about the grift. And this is where it relates back to Indiana, folks. Steve Moy on Twitter brought this up. Here are the 20 rhinos ready to vote against President Trump's big, beautiful bill because they were bought by Joe Biden and want to keep the green new scam subsidies.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Speaking of low IQ caused by climate change, maybe there is one instant. Ugh.
20 rhinos, I hear.
That's right.
And what we're talking about, folks, Erin Hounchin is one of these from the 9th Congressional District in Indiana. She is fighting for the green new scam subsidies in Congress right now. She signed a letter on it.
Oh, boy, that's lovely.
What exactly is behind this resistance to a president to whom many of the letter's signatories may well owe their seats?
Yeah.
True.
Trump carried Indiana by a huge margin, and now Erin Hounchin is fighting tooth and nail for the Green New Deal scam. And that's what I campaigned on. We all campaigned and voted for the fact that we were sick of this scam. We didn't want to pay for it. President Trump campaigned, this is from thedailycaller.com. President Trump campaigned on ending the Green New Scam. That's the $1 trillion plus climate spending in Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. The repeal of the pointless and inflationary subsidies should be a no-brainer layup for congressional Republicans. The opportunity to do so is coming up as part of President Trump's much anticipated big, beautiful bill. But now there's drama. The Inflation Reduction Act passed in August of 2022. Not a single Republican in the House or the Senate voted for it. The bill was able to avoid a filibuster in the Senate because the Senate parliamentarian controversially at the time determined that it qualified to be considered under the Senate's reconciliation process. We're going to be getting into the filibuster at a later date, folks, but the filibuster is purely a toy used by the controlling party to say no when they want to screw over president on something, and that's exactly what is happening right now in Congress. With the Democrats just filibustered another bill just 2 days ago, but it could have easily passed. The parliamentarian could have ruled it through.
And the Democrats are the ones that keep crying about the filibuster, and they get to use it all. They love using it when they can have it.
Right. So as of September of 2024, Biden spent $147 billion in 41 states, including $63 billion in just 2024 battleground states. Biden's Green New Scam spending might be corrupt, but it wasn't stupid. These subsidies were obviously intended to purchase red state politicians so it could be used to be held over their heads and used against future repeal attempts. This is from the Daily Caller. And this is not talking about corn and ethanol. This is about the subsidies for the credits. It's not about corn, folks. Another piece of resistance, according to two House members supporting the repeal with whom I'm talking about is coming from the oil and gas industry. The Inflation Reduction Act contains $8 billion in tax credits earmarked for carbon dioxide emissions and capture and sequestration. This includes $85 per ton of emissions captured and sequestered from manufacturing and refining operations, and a $60 per ton fee on emissions captured during oil production. They want that, or the oil companies do. And it has nothing to do with the climate. This subsidy is an outrageous waste, if not also fraud and abuse. First, the oil industry already had a tried and true business model that mints money without subsidies. Second, regardless of one's view on climate science, the emissions capture and sequestration would be climactically insignificant. The emissions would continue to be what they are, and it's clear that a large amount of the emissions would actually be physically captured and sequestered. Finally, President Trump is already undoing Biden's regulations that hamstrung the gas and oil industry. They do not need this subsidy. Yet, the oil industry is still demanding the subsidies. Its friends in Congress are willing to take the risk to stop the big, beautiful bill, including maintaining the vital 2017 tax cuts, for the sake of petty and pointless subsidies. Candidate Trump made this his campaign promise. Americans voted for them and elected a Congress to enact them. No one voted for the subsidies. Folks, when we come back, we'll get right back into this. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show. We're talking about climate change today. It is now time for congressional Republicans to do what they were elected to do: repeal the Green New Deal scam. It is absolutely crazy that our Republicans in Congress, including Aaron Houchin, are trying to keep that going. You know, it's just wrong. This is exactly, we need to rip it all out. We shouldn't be trying to keep these subsidies. We need to be, for me, it's a red line. We have to have a Congress, and a Republican Congress, which we have, actually start undoing Biden's very bad policies. Very bad. And instead, we get these Republicans that just keep wanting to push it. Aaron Houchin, her quote is, she signed the letter saying, hey, let's keep this New Deal crap, because she wants to take a thoughtful approach to what credits, quote unquote, if any, we're preserving. Houchin didn't offer specifics, but said the point of the letter was to say we should be thoughtful about it. We shouldn't just rip everything out. Yes, we absolutely should be ripping it out.
Every last bit of it.
Get rid of it all.
The entire thing should be completely disassembled, disemboweled, and taken out of federal law completely. There should not be any subsidies for any of the carbon sequestration, period, end of sentence. That's it.
Get rid of it for good.
Because the reason behind it is crazy. As Tony Heller says, Arctic sea ice is higher now than it was 36 years ago. So, folks, it's not about carbon being produced, because China is producing way more carbon than what the developed world has been doing for years now. And they are exponentially increasing it every year. So if you were following the quote-unquote science on carbon, we shouldn't have any ice caps left. But no, they're growing. That means, pure and simple, the carbon has zero to do with it. Zero to do with it. Climate alarmists claim that global warming is killing more and more people. That's an actual lie. The number of deaths that are linked to extreme weather events have decreased by 96.2% since 1920.
And I would just ask, if they're saying deaths from climate change, are we sure they're not talking about dimming the sun and creating with the chemicals?
Or having nuclear explosions on the poles.
Yeah, things that could actually be dangerous.
Climate-related deaths have decreased by 96.2% since 1920, despite a 6.2 billion person increase in global population over that same time period. Any climate scientist or politician who stokes fear and pretends that we are, quote unquote, running out of time to avert climate catastrophe, or claims that we cannot adapt using the technologies we have to overcome any potential challenge, is a quack and should be dismissed entirely.
Exactly.
That's from Chris Martz on X. I agree 100%.
He's right.
It's quackery. This is from Steve Moygan. Over 700 Pacific islands are actually growing in size. Remember, the polar caps were going to melt and all these small islands would disappear. They're actually growing. That's 89% of all Pacific islands are actually growing. Only 4 of 334 islands smaller than 12 acres have decreased in size since the 1980s. Only 4 of 334, but over 700 have gotten larger.
It's interesting when you think about that, and
Climate change is a hoax.
It is. It's a hoax, and it's also used for fear.
Well, and
it's a money-grabbing opportunity.
And carbon is not bad. And this is from John Schuick on Twitter. During the prior glaciation, CO2 levels dropped to 182 parts per million, just 32 parts per million above the 150 parts per million red line of death where plants stop growing. That tiny bar may not be enough CO2 to prevent the next extinction event if the next glaciation is colder. He says we're in a CO2 famine. What that means, folks, is we should be out building new coal plants, and we should take the scrubbers off of them and release the black soot in the air, because we need carbon to avoid a coming ice age. I say, no, let's keep the air clean. I'm all for clean air.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
And let the economy decide what energy we want. That's the problem today, folks, is we're letting government pick winners and losers. We're letting government choose what type of energy you get to use. Your pocketbook should decide what kind of energy you want. If you want low energy costs and you want coal power plant, you should be able to have those kind of energy.
Absolutely. And let's remember when the Obama administration back in the day tried to give that startup Solyndra a bunch of subsidies, picking winners and losers, and what happened? They went belly up and they got raided by the feds.
Well, and again, Antarctica. We're talking about the Arctic, but Antarctica gains ice for the first time in decades, reversing trend of mass loss, study finds. This was just published on May 2nd of 2025, just a couple weeks ago. We are not in a climate emergency. We're just fine. All this is just nobody, works harder to drive up the cost of gas or energy. It's Californians. Look what's happening by Gavin Newsom in California.
It's awful.
Oh, boy.
California could lose 20% of its refining capacity in a single year. Drivers will feel it. I saw today they're expecting gasoline to be $8.50 a gallon in California.
That doesn't surprise me. And keep in mind, they're trying to push for that mandate for electric cars, and then at one point they're like, wait a minute, don't charge your electric cars because the grid can't handle it.
And they were even trying to get other states to do it. At one point they tried to get the Commonwealth of Virginia to tie it in. They were trying to tie it into, and if it was up to them, they'd get all 50 states to do it.
Well, California is making gasoline scarce, so the price is going up. President Trump talked about a week ago where gasoline was $1.98 a gallon. In all fairness, I think he was talking about the wholesale price, because the wholesale price is $1.98 a gallon.
Yeah, that's probably what he was talking about.
When you see the price in Indiana, it's about $3.03 at the pump now. I think it's $2.70 in some stations up in Indy.
Up in Indianapolis, it's like $2.70, correct.
What that is, folks, is we have the 4th highest gasoline tax in the country. That's why our gasoline's not $1.98 a gallon. It's because we are paying so much in gasoline taxing, and we're going to be talking about this in a future show again. Governor Braun was talking about this, and they're talking about toll roads again. They're talking about making 465, 65, 70, 74, 69.
Not need toll roads. It's going to make it worse for everyone.
Right. No. So Governor Braun, please, no toll roads. We've already paid for the roads with the 4th highest gasoline tax in the country. Enough is enough. We've paid for the roads. We shouldn't have to pay to use them after we paid for them. The gasoline tax is there to build the roads and to maintain the roads. Instead of spending $170 million for roads for Eli Lilly, which is what they did. How do you spend $170 million for Eli Lilly and they want to put in tolls instead. So, folks, I want to close with my favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. The world is going to be just fine, folks. Tomorrow may be hot. It may be cold. But you don't have to worry about what you eat, what you drive, or how you heat or cool your home is going to have any effect on climate change, because it's not. Relax. It's going to be a bright, sunshiny day. Don't let these career politicians like Aaron Hounchin get you down. Go have a glass of lemonade. Enjoy the weather, whatever it may be. This is John Russ, and I'll see you next time on the radio and on podcast. Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify all carry this program now, playable at any time. You all have a great week. This is your friend John Rust signing off.